When people sort of say, "What's a perfect movie?" This is where my head goes to. There
Hmm.
is Jaws. It's absolutely perfect. It's so well written. It's so well directed. It's so well shot. It's so well acted. Everything about it. Nobody puts a single foot wrong. There isn't an ounce of fat on this movie.
Yeah.
Every line of dialogue, every frame of it is
You ought to be
absolutely
in
pitched perfect.
pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit.
James, I
You would
couldn't
be.
believe that we are at the 50th anniversary of Steven Spielberg's summer blockbuster setting Jaws. And what scares the hell out of me is I saw this at the cinema when it
Oh my
came
God,
out.
you're old. You're so old.
Oh my God. I remember going with my friends to go see Jaws because it was the biggest thing out there. We couldn't even go swimming after seeing this movie. We were so scared of getting in the water. But we went to see it at the Hampton Movie Theater, which was a four cinemaplex. Understand, in 1975, four cinemas in one building. How did they even do that? That is just outrageous. This is the most modern thing. It's not one. It's not even one of those crazy places that have two. This has four screens. Like no one would ever have more than that.
Absolute madness. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we know, someone who I was born 2 years after Jaws came out. And I don't remember the first time I watched it because I think I just sort of saw it on TV in bits and pieces over the years. It was always just one of those films that was in sort of in the ether, beneath the boat, under the water. I
Yeah.
had always just seen it. I don't really remember that first time, but just this notion of the fact that it was the first blockbuster that before
Hmm.
1975 the summer was a dead period for movies and for cinemas because it was too hot and there wasn't
Hmm.
air conditioning. I think it was more to do with that than anything else, and that people were, or it was assumed people would go outside and go to the beach
Yeah.
or or do whatever. And Jaws just completely changed that, completely revolutionized that, and that is why. I mean, well, today we're almost at a point where every month is of
Yeah.
summer blockbuster season.
James, I was 8 years old, and now I'm
Oh
thinking my
wow.
parents let me go see this movie when I was 8 years old. I was getting ready to turn nine. It was the summer of '75, so that September I would have turned nine. But I still remember having a box of popcorn. They used to have these little thin boxes of popcorn, and I'm eating popcorn. Scheider says, "Why don't you come down and shovel this shit?" And the first time you really get to see the shark and Jaws comes up for that, and I shot popcorn everywhere, scared the shite out of me. That moment is frozen into my brain because I mean, Jaws is a film that caused me to fall in love with movies. I
Yeah.
mean, I was 8 years old, so yeah, I've watched movies on TV, but I've reached an age where my parents could drop my friends off. We could go to the theater, then they would pick us up afterwards. And watching Jaws on the big screen, it just it's hard to put into words what it did for me. But it's like I love movies. I've got to just watch movies. I love the stories. I love, and to this day, I'll watch Jaws anytime it's on. Or,
Oh, for
I
sure.
probably watch it once a year at least. I've seen Jaws so many times in 50 years that, and yet it never gets old for me. It is, and I think I said it before we started recording. This is in my list of perfect movies. This
Absolutely.
is a perfect film.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. It is, when people sort of say, "What's a perfect movie?" This is where my head goes to. There
Hmm.
is Jaws. It's absolutely perfect. It's so well written. It's so well directed. It's so well shot. It's so well acted. Everything about it. Nobody puts a single foot wrong. There isn't an ounce of fat on this movie.
Yeah.
Every line of dialogue, every frame of it is absolutely pitched perfect. And it's crazy. I mean, it's got one of the most sort of storied making ofs in history, that
Yeah.
it was such a disaster and that the shark wouldn't stay in the water and blah 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 blah. We're not going to rehash through all of that. Everybody knows all of that, and if you don't, there's a lot of people saying it better than we're ever going to say it here. And the fact that Spielberg was so young and that the studio had no faith in him, and that they make so many changes to the book. You got to remember that this was kind of an adaptation of a big sort of best-selling sort of airport novel, for want of a better phrase. You know,
Peter Benchley.
Peter Benchley's book that had come out just, I think, the year or a couple of years before, something like that, had been a big hit as well. And they were like, okay, we're going to do the movie of Jaws, which is, you know, inevitable. And they change a lot. And not least, they changed the character of Hooper, the Richard Dreyfuss character, because in the book, he has an affair with Brody's wife, and he's a bit of a shitbag. And, you know, a lot of you know, the characters just aren't as relatable and aren't as sympathetic. And one of the reasons that the film works as well as it does is that you love these characters. Even Robert Shaw's Quint, you know, who is the salty old sea dog that has influenced and informed every salty old sea dog ever since. You love him. You know, he's many people's favorite characters, you know, and a lot of that is because he kind of redeems himself in the eyes of the other characters, because you know, they manage to bond over the course of this journey just in time, just before he gets eaten. And there are all of these little sort of elements that the film executes so perfectly, you know, that it just creates a formula to sort of successful mainstream filmmaking, which has become like a blueprint. It's become a template for everything that has come afterward.
Yeah, I almost feel like I don't want to go too much into it because, like you said, everything about this movie that's meant to be said, we've already heard it. There's nothing I'm going to say that you haven't heard, whether it's Robert Shaw talking about the Indianapolis that went down, that whole story he tells, which the way Robert Shaw conveys it, I can...
Until he bites you, and those black eyes roll over white, and then... Oh, then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
I can hear his voice. I can hear his voice, and I'll tell you, it's you know, it's just done so wonderfully. But one thing I will ask, though, you mentioned about how we all know that the shark wasn't working well, and that ultimately led to actually one of the things that makes the film great is you never actually get to see the shark initially, and you see it so seldom that the imagination is allowed to take over. Which begs the question, if Spielberg was making Jaws with modern technology, would we have had as great a movie? Probably would have been a really good movie, but would it have been the blockbuster classic we've come to fall in love with and has really shaped cinema history?
I think you have to say no. You know, it's difficult to say it, and you can't really point to any other movie and say, look, this movie shows the sharks too much. It's like, yeah, but those movies have seen Jaws too, you know, and everybody involved on those movies have seen Jaws. And so they are still informed by Jaws, and they are just choosing to do more or less than Jaws did, you know. But if Jaws had the technology and all the rest of it, guarantee you would have seen, I mean, Spielberg has come out and said it, you would have seen a lot more of the shark. And one suspects that might have lessened the impact. You know, it's that great horror movie trope of like, don't show it. Yeah, just leave it in the shadows, leave it under the water, leave it to your imagination. You know, we see other sharks. We see the results of a shark attack. We see what was left of the body. We see the yellow barrels. You know, we see all this other stuff in place of the shark until you finally see it once or twice, you know, right towards the end. And so your imagination is left to do the rest. And I think that there is nothing more powerful than what you can conjure up in your mind. And so, you know, you have to kind of say no. I mean, the film has been so influential. It's had 3 official sequels, and every other shark movie, or even every other killer animal movie that has come since, is compared to Jaws, and rightly so. And some are okay, some are good, some are bad. I don't think anything will ever top Jaws, just for the simplicity of its execution, and because it existed in a world of practical effects. You know, they're really out on the water. There's really something in the water. I think if it was made today, that they probably wouldn't even be out on the open water. And you can tell, as good as special effects have gotten, you can still tell it still feels safer, still feels different. You know, there is something about just being in the water, you know, just treading water in the open ocean, and you know, you know how little you know about what's beneath the surface, you know, and just how it is just swarming with life and with
Hmm.
creatures who are all feasting off each other. And you know how fishing works. You put something new into that environment and everything attacks it. So if you're that thing, if you're that worm on that hook, yeah, it's terrifying. And I think that existed before that opening sequence in Jaws, where you have, Chrissy, the girl from the beach, treading water at
Right.
night. But that was the first time that it was really kind of portrayed on screen, and I think it just has lived in everybody's mind ever since.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a tactileness to it that, and it's one of the reasons that for me, one of my favorite cinema decades is the 70s.
Oh,
There's
sure.
just such a raw, visceral feeling in a 70s film that you don't really capture in any other decade. I love to sit and watch a 70s movie. The minute I start watching a film I haven't seen, and if it's in the 70s, I know it's in the 70s because it has this. I mean, you can say that about every decade. I know an
Yeah.
80s film, I know a 90s film, but the 70s just has that. Even when they go into Star Wars, we start to get special effects. The special effects are not CGI. There's
Mm.
real people on huge ping pong tables with a real model. There is still a feeling of reality even amongst the special effects. And so that's why I just love 70s films.
Yeah, oh, me too. I think it's my favorite single decade. It's certainly when, as I was coming up, it's where all the cool movies were from, and
Yes.
all the careers began of all the filmmakers and actors that I enjoyed. And yeah, there's an attitude, I think, to filmmaking from the 70s that doesn't
Hmm.
exist anymore. There is that they're still sort of imbued with this counterculture, sort of
Yeah.
almost aggressively anti-mainstream
Yeah.
kind of sensibility, where even a movie like Jaws, which turned obviously into one of the most popular movies of all time, isn't pandering to like a
Yes. Yeah.
family audience in any way,
Yeah.
even in a way that something like Jurassic Park, which came out almost 20 years later by the same director, and taps into many of the same
Yeah.
fears, if you
Yeah.
like. Is far more cuddly and family friendly, and you've got the
Yeah.
children, and you've got the benevolent grandfather and all this kind of stuff. There's just something, and it feels far more like it's packaged to make toys and things like
Yeah.
that. There's a rampant commercialism and a cynicism to filmmaking now, and it has been ever
Yeah.
since, that wasn't there in the 70s. Even Star Wars, even Jaws, they were just like, no, 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 I'm just creating a world here, and if
Yeah.
you I don't care how old you are, I'm not going to be directing this really to any of you.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I had never thought about this before, but the 70s is kind of almost the fulcrum between two different panderings, so to speak. Pre 70s, we have a pandering to a certain moral code
Yeah.
of we can't do this. In the 70s, we begin to eschew all that. But then from the 80s on, there's another moral code. I know we hate using the term woke, and I'm not going to say 80s movies are woke, but there becomes a sensibility that certain considerations have to be put into place in the filmmaking that kind of escalate into the 90s and the 2000s. Whereas in the 70s, no one cared about any of those considerations.
No.
And in the 70s, going the other way, no one cared about those considerations. It's almost like it's that decade where, and I'm sure there's going to be criticisms, and people watching this will have criticisms of that, but they didn't have to pander to anybody, more or less. And so there's a rawness in those films that I think is lost going forward.
Yeah, I think the irony of all of this is that arguably it's Jaws' fault, because George, that would be a different movie, because Jaws did change, I think, the studio's perception of what a movie could be. What
Yeah.
a big, and that a big successful movie didn't need to be a sort of a musical or
Hmm.
a swords and sandals movie or something like that. It could be something far more visceral, far more exciting. And obviously in the 80s is where you saw like the blockbuster really take shape and just become what do I mean? Like a product
Yeah.
in a way that hadn't been really before, and you could tap into all of these spin-offs, like toys and
Hmm.
Happy Meals and bed linen and all of this kind of craziness. And I think Jaws financially put it in their ideas, and then Star Wars really showed them, the expanse that you could go to with merchandising and all this kind of stuff. And once that was in place, you're like, well, we have to make every film accessible for the whole family. The kids have to come, because kids are going to be the ones that want the toy, that want the breakfast cereal, that want the bed, the bed pajamas or whatever. But yeah, the 70s was that kind of perfect sort of sweet spot. The studio system had collapsed. They'd got rid of all of their talent because they couldn't afford it anymore, and television had challenged all of that. The Hays Code had kind of been forgotten about, or the production code, or whatever you call it. And you've got this new generation of cine literate, film educated filmmakers come in who had the kind of keys to the kingdom. They were like, okay, well, we can kind of do whatever we want. And Jaws is a fantastic product, a beneficiary of that sort of confluence of circumstances. And you just look at the attitudes in the movie and these characters, and how you have these three dudes who are all from very different backgrounds with very different worldviews, who are thrown together in a situation. It's like, we got to make this shit work. Otherwise, the world as we know it certainly is all going to end. And I think that's the beauty of it, is the economy of it, not just in how much or how little you see the shark, but just how that boat becomes, at first it's the island, and then it's and then it's the family, and then it's the boat, and it becomes this microcosm for all of us, and we can all relate to at least one of these characters. And no, it's beautiful. It's so perfect. Everything about it is fantastic.
We're going to need a bigger boat. We're going to. Do you have any, in closing, do you have any anecdote of a wonderful time that you saw Jaws? Like, was there any setting that you enjoyed?
I was, and it means I have to kind of sort of toot my own trumpet a little bit, but
here we go.
I don't mind doing that. Is that actually almost 10 years ago to the day? I just looked it up before we started, and it was on the 7th of June 2015. There was a screening of Jaws, which I suppose would have been the 40th anniversary. At the Hong Kong Film Archive, and it was like a Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon or something like that, and there was a big sort of matinee, and I think it had been restored, one of the many times that it keeps getting restored. It had been restored and put on a screening, and I was doing a bit of work with the Film Archive at the time, and so they said, do you want to like introduce the movie and do it? Not only that, but do you want to do a talk after the screening? And I was like, absolutely. So we did a sold out sort of Saturday afternoon matinee screening at the Film Archive, and then afterwards I came on with an MC, and we sat down and talked for a good like sort of half an hour or so. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but it was quite long, just about the movie, and even took a few questions from the audience. And I would say actually about 2/3 of the audience stayed for that, and that's always a really fantastic feeling. And of course, I went through the whole production of it and all the rest of it. But also, I remember it had been a film that I'd studied quite a lot at university as well. Pulling apart sort of the shot compositions and all this kind of stuff. So I was able to like just go off on one and just ramble incessantly. And not only was that just a wonderful opportunity for me just to talk about one of my all-time favorite films to a crowd, a captive audience. They're like, lock the doors, I'm going to keep you in here. I remember afterwards, someone came up to me, just sort of a middle-aged Chinese guy, there on his own, who I actually kind of recognized because I used to go to a lot of those screenings, and some of the same people like show up. And so I was kind of like, okay, I didn't know him, but I kind of recognized. And he came up and he said, thanks a lot for that. That's the best post-screening talk I've ever heard at this place. And that's at the Hong Kong Film Archive, where the majority of the talks are obviously done in Cantonese, and they're normally about old Chinese movies from people who really know what they're talking about as well. And so for anybody, to come up to you and say something like that after a screen, I was just like, oh my God, thank you so much. It just validated everything and has really stuck with me. And obviously that is tied to Jaws. And it's just like, great. That's my perfect memory of
what a fantastic story. Well, that's a fantastic story, James. That I didn't know. And, it's a great story to end on. Why don't I just ask our viewers, hey, that's what we thought of going down this memory lane of in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Jaws. Viewers out there, what is your memory? What's your best memory of having seen Jaws? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. James?
Well, exactly. As we have reiterated already, there's very little that can be said or added to the story of Jaws and its production and its legacy and all the rest of it. So I think this has been a great opportunity to sort of reflect on what it means to us. How it fits into our lifetime and our movie-going identity, if you like, and where it sits with us. And I think you can tell that we both absolutely love this movie and always have and probably always will. So, yeah, let's throw it to you. When did you first see it? What do you love about it? If you don't like it, then I'd love to hear those reasons as well. I know. But it's a safe space. Come on. Why don't you like Jaws? Let us know in the comments.
Love to hear from you. Until next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.